Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
So Logan, I wanted to reel off a number of headlines that are linked in some way. I'm sure you'll spot why they're linked in my head and what's going on, and then ask you a very open question, probably lead you on like I usually do with several reasons why, and then let you waffle. But here we go.
Yeah.
And we're all going to do is do the headlines. Nothing
I know
else.
where this is going, because I was going to ask you about this pre-podcast if we were going to cover it, and I thought I don't need to, because I'm sure we're going to. And I'm already predicting the question you're going to ask, and I'll be really intrigued if it's not what I think it is. I'll be really cool.
Okay, so this is not an exhaustive list or headline reading, but it's here to demonstrate a potential trend. Okay?
Yeah.
2K has laid off a group of developers at Visual Concepts. Oh, is this what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
It's been honest, so I'll let you reel them off, but it literally feels like every day there's been like a new set of...
Yeah.
Go on.
Laid off a group of developers at Visual Concepts Austin. Sega is reportedly laying off more than 10% of their American staff. Microsoft is cutting 1,900 staff across Xbox, Bethesda, and Activision Blizzard. Embracer confirms it has now laid off 1,400 employees, and more cuts could be coming. Electronic Arts is laying off 5% of its workforce. Life is Strange sequel developer Stec 9 lays off 20% of staff. PlayStation is cutting around 900 staff worldwide, around 8% of its entire workforce. And then there's actually I've never normally go here, but Kotaku have created almost, I think they claim it's an exhaustive list. Obviously, I've not checked that they've got everything on here, but it's got a lot of others on here as well. By their metric, there's been over 8,100 layoffs, just, 60 odd days into the year? And as you mentioned there, it does seem like every day or every week or every other week there's an announcement of cuts, cost cutting, and whatnot in the video game industry. It's happening in other industries as well. I saw Sainsbury's were at it the other day. So we're talking about supermarket profit margins. Maybe theirs is a bit lower than Tesco's, and they've struggled there. Well, I guess the overriding question is what's going on, and potential reasons for that, and there'll be more than just one reason, obviously. But is this a correction of a COVID bubble? An uplift in demand, and then that not sustaining because people had to go back to bloody work, didn't they? Is it a bad outlook for the way the health of the industry at the moment for video games? Is there a financial peril within the industry itself that's not potentially sustainable? Is it just dog shit economics across the globe? No one seems happy, but then I always say no one was ever happy. When was the last time you ever spoke to anyone? Yeah, back in the 80s, fuck me, it was really affluent then. Everyone's always moaning.
Everyone does do that. Everyone goes, oh, it was so... And you go back then, and I remember...
14% interest rate.
Yeah, where interest rates overnight went up like something ridiculous, and everyone went, well, I'm fucked, I can't afford my mortgage. Literally, there's nothing I can do here.
No.
I think broadly this has always been the case. I feel like we've had it pretty good in some ways. Like I take away the past 5 years, right? But up until like 2020, like that period from like 2001 or 2000, where there's always doubt around the Y2K and all that sort of, that period of time was relatively stable. So there's been this like period of almost sustained
big
growth.
Big financial crash, 2008, nearly killed everyone.
Yeah, but it didn't. Like, it's sort of more of a bubble. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's been like minor bubbles, but there's nothing that's been sort of catastrophic. And I think broadly, a lot of industries are cyclical as well. So things like they'll chuck resource at it, and then the economy, demand, whatever contracts, and they have to go, well, the staff has to contract with it. And it kind of is just the way it goes. The weird thing specifically here feels like it's it's heavily happening in almost every game studio and big companies. Like, it's not just like
Yeah.
a game's failed or a studio's failing and they're making cuts or whatever. It's literally like big companies that have had a lot of success cutting numbers.
Blowing it.
I think a lot of companies chucked resource and just went to people as the immediate solution to anything during COVID. And I think there is still you know, a large portion of businesses that are probably running a bit hot in terms of overall numbers. I was trying to figure out whether there's like some sort of like financial reporting deadline or something where they have to make the numbers up and or forecast for next year. And to do that, they have to get rid of and lower their wage bill because that's ultimately the biggest cost, like ongoing cost that every company has to control. So it's the easiest way to make the numbers look better. So I think there's a load of different factors, but probably I reckon the main one is cooking the books.
Do you think how many of these people do you think are redeployed somewhere across the industry?
Well,
Like
I don't think that. Well,
Or do you think they
redeployed
lost-
across the industry.
Yeah, so
i.e.
say,
you
you go
yeah.
and work at another studio, and because the headlines are always, it's 8,100 and counting have been laid off, which is factually true. But does it tell the whole story if a large proportion of those are able to seek work elsewhere? I don't know if that's the case. It's never
Of course they
reported
will.
on.
Yeah. I mean, they will get. For those 8,100 people that have been laid off, there'll be 10,000 jobs open. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think there will always be, or at least it always seems to be the way that for every company that's cutting, there's one that's trying to grow, right? And I think that's always the way. So I don't think it's a case of, there's 8,000 people that are never going to get a job again. It's kind of like, if I looked out there for my role, like if they made me redundant, there's probably 10 roles I could apply for straight away. So I assume it's similar-ish. I mean, obviously, if you're a senior person, the more senior you get, the likelihood of the role being open is smaller because they're obviously a smaller amount of senior roles.
They've made enough money already. They should have been more prudent with their cash if they've been sitting there at executive levels and they're like, I'm uptight now. What?
It's what they do. The easiest level to cut always is middle management.
Yeah.
They go, what are you doing? And they cut them. Then they realise what they're doing and they go, right, we need to get John and Alan back because they were stopping the shit from coming up and now I'm having to deal with it.
They don't want to deal with the toot, do they?
No, so they make the cuts and then they go, I can't be dealing with this. So we'll get John and Alan in. But I think a lot of industries broadly have overhired over the past few years, and they're trying to.
Tech in particular.
Sorry,
tech in particular, really.
Tech it's because everyone had to scale and get things immediately available, like virtually and digitally. And the easiest and quickest way to do it is chuck numbers at it. And then you've got to deal with that. And you kind of hope that people will naturally leave and deal with it through attrition. But then when that doesn't, you get some people that are a bit more sticky, you go, right, get out. And it's, that's a really brutal way of putting it. There's obviously people's jobs and families and livelihoods at stake here. But, it's never nice, but this is what I say to people. Companies, and they speak about loyalty to companies and stuff like that. It's like, honestly, as soon as you're surplus to requirements, other than maybe the odd few cases, they'll go, thanks, see you later. And you're gone, you're out the door. And that is the brutal nature of working for corporate entities in this life. But it's, I have to say, it's not just happening in the gaming world. I've seen it broadly across finance and, as you say, pretty much most areas have had it. But you only hear about the negatives. You only hear, so and so are cutting 1,000 jobs. You don't go, so and so's posted and looking for an extra 1,500. You don't ever hear of that. You just hear of the cuts.
In some industries, you do. I remember seeing there was I can't remember who it was now. Someone in the financial sector. They were doing a restructure, and there's we're going to be. Essentially, it was we're doing a restructure. It'll affect 3,000 people or whatever it was, but there'll be a net increase in roles. But the net increase of roles was for specialist people in technical spaces. So actually, a lot of, like you would say, probably middle management people wouldn't ever be appropriate for that role.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't get redeployed, but. You don't really get that in this industry. It's kind of like, right, and even at the end of a game cycle or end of a project, once the game's done, the need to continue having that amount of people, unless you've immediately got wheels spinning for the next project, or if it's a live service type deal, you often see people roll off and go on to other projects. There's a lot of freelancers, there's a lot of independent contractors.
I was going to say, it must be like more of a contracting industry where you're in on a 18-month, 2-year contract to deliver something, and then you know that. Like you see in a lot of industries, like you're brought in like regulatory change and project management and all that kind of stuff. Like you kind of work on one thing and then you roll off, and you know you're rolling off. You're not there. You're not expecting that. So I don't know how much of these sort of jobs are in that bucket. I mean, normally you'd assume it's not contract staff or, as you say, like freelance people, but it could be. But as I say, obviously games are cyclical. I think some of the announcements were interesting as well, though, because it referenced like obviously they're canning a Star Wars game that Respawn were doing, and there's several things like that where it seems like there's some strategic things, if you like, that haven't really worked out as they intended, or they're not progressing with because of cost. So it appears to be, in my view at least, something to do with controlling cost, either for this year or next. I'm not sure which one it is. Woofer's here. There he is.
Come to investigate. It normally
Come
means
to check it out.
He's been to toilet, so he shouldn't really be in here. Should you, Dave?
Just having a little look around.
Yeah, he doesn't like this room. Here's all the shouting from Helldivers coming out, and he's like, what's going on in there?
Well, understandably, you would say.
When he's trying to get to sleep at 3 a.m.
But yeah, I think broadly for the industry, it's, obviously, I wouldn't say it's worrying. It's just strange that everything's been announced. I haven't really tied to the reason why, but it feels like it's probably to do with some sort of financial rebalancing or positioning, either for the end of a year or for the beginning of one. And they need to get things in line.
Well, you use the word need to. Do they actually need to? Or are they just like, we want to hit a certain profit milestone. And it's we don't need to. We're not going to go under and end the business, but we want to hit X expectations for shareholders or whatever it might be. We want to pay out dividends, and in order to do that, so it's not actually, the need is not a life or death or a we're going to close job. It's more out of the desire for growth usually.
Well, the need is always driven by the numbers, like largely. So you get people that sit in the room, make up, I wouldn't say like arbitrary figures, but they go, right, we need to make, I don't know, say 2 billion in profit this year. Something ridiculous, right? Yeah. And they've chucked that out there. They put that out there at the beginning of the year. And what happens is their share price goes up on accordance that they're saying they're going to make all this profit. So then if they look at it halfway through the year and they go, oh, we're off track on that. When they announce that, and when it comes out in the press, their share price dips.
Yeah.
And everyone loses a load of money. People lose faith in the stock. Do you know what I mean? So everything is largely driven by these companies by like maintaining the credibility of the forecasts that they say versus what they're delivering. And obviously, if there are certain macroeconomic effects that mean they can't get there, then that everyone goes, oh, okay, it weren't poor management, it wasn't poor decision making, it was just unfortunate economic situations or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't affect it. But I think sometimes they look at it and they go, that game is not going to get us, or that project, whatever it is, we need, they go to Alan and John and go, Alan, we ain't making the numbers. We've got a big, we need to make it look a little bit better. So we need to get rid of X amount of people and go off and make it so. And I think sometimes that is just the reality of it. Need is driven by their targets, and obviously all these people are accountable to a board and shareholders. So they'll go, what are you doing about it? How are you getting us our returns? And they go, well, Stephen, Joe and Bobby over there are all out of jobs.
Hey, why am I going out of a job? Jesus.
So there you go, cut. But yeah, it's not good, because I think when you see this project's being cut, so things that we potentially might get to play are not going to come to fruition. Not everyone was asking for a Star Wars game made by Respawn, but I'd have been sniffing.
Well, they've done those, what's the name, didn't they? Those Star Wars Jedi. So they called Star Wars Jedi, I think. Jedi Knight? I can't remember. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Star Wars Jedi, whatever the other one was. I haven't played the sequel, but yeah, I mean, it sounded like in amongst this for EA as well, there was a Mandalorian type game that was lost. And I think that always seems like, I don't know, it seems like low-hanging fruit to me that it's some sort of Mandalorian game with different armor and weapons. And I'm already thinking like how that could be, how progression could be implemented, which every game demands these days.
Yeah.
And yeah, it looks like that's going away, or maybe they'll be retooled in some way. But it's crazy to think it, all those the reasons you explained there for the profit side of things and for the big business side of things, that if you scale that down to a small privately owned studio or business, they couldn't. I mean, they couldn't just go, "Oh, we're going to cut headcount because we want to grow more." Like their first and foremost priority is just sustaining the business, and therefore cutting people is sometimes detriment. No, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's,
I think that's sometimes the interesting thing, right? It's kind of like you said there, cutting people to grow. I don't think it's cutting people to grow. I mean,
no,
I've seen it before where they just go, we're going to have to sink time and money into that, and it might not provide the return we want. So sometimes you just have to cut your losses. And I think some of these bigger studios especially will try stuff. Like they'll go, we'll try it and see how we go. But they're also big enough to cut the losses on it if it ain't going the way that they want it to, or if the budget, for whatever reason, isn't going to permit that continued investment, then they'll just go cut it.
Yeah.
And it seems quite brutal because, as you say, people literally lose their jobs over it. But if it ain't, there's also an argument sometimes. I'm not saying they're at fault, but if it's not delivering and it's not along the lines that they wanted it to be, like arguably the people that are accountable for delivering that are also, if they haven't made it to where the board or whoever senior management expected it to be, then is it right their jobs are cut because they haven't met the expectation in some way? And I'm not saying that's always the way, but I think essentially a lot of businesses overhired. They might have tried some different things. You've got some big names in there, Sony, Microsoft. Clearly they're not hard up for cold hard cash. So maybe that's just a result of trying things. And I also wonder whether there's an element of we'll just get lost in the sea of it. Because if it's just Sony that comes out with it, then they're out there on their own, right? But if there's a sea of people announcing it, let's get it out there whilst it's...
Might as well.
Just add to the bucket because there's less focus. So I wonder if it's a little bit opportunistic as well.
Oh yeah, it's similar to the price hike from £60 UK to £70 UK. The first people to do it were crapped on. By the time Microsoft came around and said they were going to do it, it was shoulder shrugging because the damage had already been done for the other firms optically. If you're going first, you're going to be under the cosh. But it'd be interesting to see if this if there is some sort of shift. I mean, there's talking about budgets of video games, particularly in Sony's house, being way too much and not sustainable at all. Like, are we going to see slightly scaled down games? Does Spider-Man 2 need to cost $200 million more than Spider-Man OG? Not sure.
Why do they get that signed off? Like, because you've already done. Now, I don't want to sound. I am by far the least technical here, I think, but like you've already done the groundwork.
Yeah, the city's half done. At least
is there.
Yeah.
Like all you're doing is sort of remodeling, and obviously there's additional things.
All those suits, mate, they take time. All those dozens and dozens of non-canonical suits that they've added.
I don't need that many.
No.
At least 50% of those could be cut in my view.
Don't need any more as far as I'm concerned, but that's that. Anyway, I don't know if we'll report back on this. It may just be something that happens every couple of weeks, so I thought we should touch on it. We have no real knowledge as to what's going on. It's all guesswork, as it is for every other article you've read out there, so don't believe
speculation and innuendo.
Absolutely. This is Idle Game Chat, Dimp Digital's flagship video game podcast. We are available on your favourite podcast app on YouTube, completely free. Although, if your favourite podcast app is Google Podcasts, apparently that's going away. I had our podcast host send us an email. They sent it to, not a personal email, they sent it to everyone, obviously, and it was like, be aware that Google Podcasts is going away. So I think YouTube are going to pick up the baton there because they started to add podcast playlists about 6 months ago. So it'll be interesting where that goes. But once again, Google Podcasts, they've tried several times and can't seem to get it off the ground. But they do have YouTube, which is a great source of video and audio content. So will there be some synergy there? Could you like watch it at home and then seamlessly just listen to it on the go? But I suspect that will require a YouTube Premium subscription for that, because you can't watch those videos or listen to them with a unless it's
premium YouTube.
I've only used it for when it's free, like when they offer a free month, and it is. I mean, the amount of watch on it actually would make sense than some of the other subscriptions that are getting wheeled out for £12 a month. But the principle of it annoys me, because it's a free service in my head, and that's how it'll always be. And the ads are becoming more obnoxious. Like, so I put it on yesterday. 45 seconds, it said, it had a countdown of ads. It had about 4 of them. It used to be just 1 5-second one. So they're really trying to push you in that direction. But I'm like, look, not yet. Need to offer some more.
I don't mind having ads, because I know that they are the ones that are putting the money in the pocket of the person that's providing the content. And if I'm not going to do it, I think they should get it from somewhere. But I agree. I, for some reason in my head, can't justify even though the most content I consume is probably via YouTube, I refuse to pay out of my pocket for it. I think it's overly expensive as well. But it isn't really. Like, I'd still get good value from it, but I always in principle think if I can get something for free and watch an ad, that seems a more economical way of doing it. But there you go. I just thought I'd ask if you have got exactly the same frame of mind that I have with it.
Yeah, the problem they've got on the podcast front is, like I said, the only way, if you want to listen to something, you can, but you have to, unless you've got YouTube Premium, you have to have the video open streaming. Now, if you've got YouTube Premium, you can close it on your phone and have it run in the background, basically. But that's locked behind the paywall, and podcasts inherently work like that. You can download them off through an app like Podcast Addict, which I use, on your device, and you just play them whenever. That's the whole point in my eyes. So I don't know what they're going to do. It'll be interesting. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll just leave it as it is and think this isn't worth the paper it's written on.
I'd just say pick it up through Spotify, because that solves that problem. You get a bunch of ads, and then you can listen to half hour without it poking its nose in. And I think that is the way to be doing it. But obviously, if you've got YouTube Premium, and that's your preferred method of taking it. But as you say, there are also lots of other free alternatives out there, or cheaper alternatives.
I think Podcast Addict was free, and then I paid. It's like, it's like £1.50 or something. This is now. That's the only thing I use. I don't need to use anything else. But
because it picks up the feed, right? Like, this is what I mean. It's not like you
don't need to
locked
be paying.
out. They're open APIs.
Yeah. No, exactly. So it's on all those anyway, this podcast, and it's on Facebook lurking. There's still some old. What are you doing, Davey? Sat down now. Good Lord, he ain't going to go away, I don't think. But you find it. Just put in Idle Game Chat, and you'll find it somewhere. Well, if you stumbled across this, you must have found it to start with. So just go back to that source would be my suggestion.
Those algorithms will bring it forward.
Wow. Bury us, because we keep saying the word cunt. If you want to support us, this is a grassroots and independent endeavour. Head over to patreon.com/Dimp Digital and join the community. #hand in pocket. And who knows, you could send us fan mail, like the sniffometer, the official Dimp Digital sniff. I'm not sure how and when to use this, if I'm honest.
Well, I think when we're talking about upcoming games,
but we don't really.
Well, no, we talk about them potentially in the FGL.
That's the place I'm thinking. Maybe it's got to be. Maybe after that we have to give a rating ourselves based on the scores.
We do talk about some games
occasionally,
mainly,
but they're special occasions.
They are, yeah, you're right. They'll be reserved for like the Grand Theft Autos of the world.
Exactly. Well, anyway, let's see. We've got the FGL update coming here. What we got? Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. So there's nothing in the. So you and Paper, feet up.
Yeah.
Nothing's happened. It's still 348 to Paper, 266 to you. He's got 4 games out. You've got 3. It's as simple as that. It's an 82-point delta. So, close.
Can easily make that up.
Can easily make it up. Can easily blow it. It's not. It's one of those. It's not a unsustainable lead. It's not a lead.
What Sir Alex would say is, you want the points in the bag, though.
Yeah, he don't. Yeah, he is right about that. Because you don't know what's going to happen, do you? Yeah. You want the goal difference as well. Otherwise, it's Heartbreak City when Aguero comes along. Anyway, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. Pac-Man Adcock got an 81. So this had some controversy because actually when I originally posted the score, OpenCritic were putting the remake reviews under the first game's review page, and I didn't notice. I just didn't even. And Adkins spotted it as he always does because he's got no life. And at that point, there was no remake page. Eventually, the remake page was made. The score went up, so Adcock happy. Adkins may have given away a few points there, but it's sitting on an 81. It's a remake of the original. Let's find something. Jim Hargreaves, The Sixth Axis. What was it? Owen Hargreaves, wasn't it?
Yeah, his dad.
Tendinitis. Could be. He looks a bit young. Tendinitis in the knees, wasn't it?
He had
They treat me
sorts
like
of
a
stuff.
guinea pig, he said.
I think he had shin splints as well for a long period of time.
That is an appalling shin splint. I don't know if you ever had it, but
apparently it itches, doesn't it, or something?
yeah, it's. I mean, I've had it occasionally, but I'm not an athlete. But I'm like, it really is just a strange phenomenon that I can't wrap my head around. Like, I don't think there's anything you can do about it. It just fucking hurts for no reason. I'm not even sure it's damaging you in any way. It's just there's pain when you're yeah. So I don't be wishing that on people if they can help it. Anyway, Hargreaves, Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons was hardly in need of a remake. However, replaying the game more than a decade after its debut, where every inch has been beautifully crafted anew, has been a delightful experience and one we can finally share with a second player. We just wish there was more of it. So perhaps a short runtime, which might interest people when there's the bloatvilles of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth lurking. 8 out of 10 from Hargreaves, which is kind of in line with that. Did you ever play this back in the day? I assume you didn't, because this was over a decade ago. Logan's, I don't know what he's up to gaming wise. Probably Pro Evo might be lurking, but I know definitely not that. It's 15, 20 years ago. But I remember seeing this back in the day. I was like, oh, I'll play that one day, and then never did. So in terms of sniffometer, it could be lurking for me if I get this fucking thing right. I don't know if I got that right, have I? It's fucking...
And it's blurring it out.
That's the trouble with this. Here we go.
Oh, there you go.
A bit lower in it. I'll put it there.
I think for me it's probably... I feel bad classing it as tut, but it's probably around the whirl to the tut. I did see it. I've seen it around, but there was nothing there that really made me... There's nothing about it that makes me go, yeah, I should pick that up. It needs to really buzz me, and it didn't. So can't imagine I would pick this up.
Two-player co-op could replace the Division.
I mean, that's got potential. Co-op's always good fun. If it's got a bit of a throwaway story and it's just fun to play, then why not? But I'd have to have a proper look, see what it's...
£12.80 on the Xbox store.
Okay, it needs to go on that Game Pass.
So for 1 month's subscription fee, you could have it and own it outright.
I'm already paying the subscription fee. So it's a
Well,
double bubble.
why though? Now we're getting to that question, aren't we? That's going in the bin next year for me. So that won't be I hate dealing with it. I'm sick of it. I've had enough.
Gonna vote with his wallet. Yeah, it's a good question actually. One that I haven't really asked myself of late.
No. But I will. Again, to be honest, it's not going to get a look in these days. At the moment, with, as I said, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth just come out fresh off the heels of that. A few hours in that
120
already.
hours.
Well, it'll take me longer, so 150 hours probably knowing me. And then obviously Helldivers is still lurking for people. That's got a consistent daily player count from within the Dimp and Friends realm, so that's something I can hop on. Even so, yesterday I played Final Fantasy VII Remake, Rebirth. That's the new fresh game. And then I even stopped for a bit. It was like, you know what, I'm just going to do 45 minutes Helldivers. I went in, no one was online, just jumped into a random game to help someone, did their operation the last 2, and then walked out. And I was like, that's it. And that's what it can become. Yeah, clever from Arrowhead. Yeah,
it is. It is almost palate cleanser territory, midday palate cleanser, but it can fulfil both. It can also be the main event. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, I agree. Splatoon Side Order. So this is a DLC enhancement. This is coming from matey boy Parky, who's been quiet. He's on the Helldives as well, lurking. So even he's been rammed into it.
The most unfortunate Helldiver, may I add.
Is he? Does he get stung? Does he a lot? Ooh.
It's really, I feel bad for him.
I mean, I always say it's your own fault, and I've said that to you when those eagles come flying on your head. But I think they were going to track like every stat at one point, like how long your average Helldiver's life expect, all this stuff. They didn't, they scoped out the game, but it would have been interesting to see people's stats, like strengths versus weaknesses and whatnot. But yeah, he's got this expansion pass side order sitting on a 78. Let's go to Metro Game Central, the Nintendo nerds. They've given it to Skynet. There's no one named for this. Another fun piece of Splatoon single-player DLC with an interesting mix of third-person shooter and roguelike that would have been much better as a main story mode from the start. So they've criticised it at the end there. 7 out of 10, which probably means it's a 4 out of 10 if it's like that from them. So that's no good. In terms of sniffometer, that can go right in the blower section because that's never going to get picked up from me. Never.
Nah,
because
no
I haven't got the
chance.
base game.
No.
I've got no intention of getting the base game. What's this
I
bully
agree.
doing now? Running him round. But yeah, it's a shame for them. It's not a bad score for Parker. It's his last game on his list, so it's right down his pecking order. And the 78, I think, in that Grand Prix. And remember, he was 6th in the ranking, so it's the very last game that was dropped on the list. And there's worse games further up the list we saw with Biff sitting there with 44s. So, Parky can't be too dissatisfied with that, sitting on a 78. Next one, Terminator Dark Fate Defiance. Salmon lurking to drop this one in. Now, it hasn't got many reviews. It's got 6, I think. So this score, take with a pinch of salt, but it's on a 77. And it was on an 83 or 84 even the other day. So it's already dropped. I think one of that is because IGN have taken a big old shit on it. John Balding has come along. And he said, Terminator Dark Fate Defiance may look the part, but the obnoxious mission design and confused campaign structure of this RTS just aren't worth your time. So there's a question here. He's the outlier. All the others are in the 8s. And there's only like 5 others there. And even IGN Italy, 8.5. So Andrea Gianni. Oh, good Lord. Gianni. Yeah, that's about right. He's given it an 8.5. So my question is, has John just struggled with this and can't pick up the basics? He seems like a real heavy outlier. And I know the sample size is small, but to say it's... when people say confusing and obnoxious, I think, have you struggled?
Subjective.
Yeah. Have you struggled with basics? Because I've seen people not reading fucking tutorials and then complaining that they don't know how things work.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you think, I wonder if he's like rushed through it.
Let's see. Let's see if he's a rusher. Well, he hasn't reviewed anything since November, so he ain't that hard up for time.
And he's just picked this one up, which is weird.
Pathetic.
Yeah,
Balding.
I mean, it feels like he might have struggled with it, but this is what OpenCritic flushes out largely, and the idea of it is it gives you the mean average. I don't know if that's right or not. It gives you the average.
It gives you something to work off.
Yeah. So the idea is it flushes out the idiocy or the cluelessness or subjectivity and gives you a holistic health check. And it sounds like John might have struggled.
Yeah, he's not had a good time, has he? And just to be fair to Dark Fate Defiance, here is Andrea Gianni, 8.5. Terminator Dark Fate Defiance is an intense and elaborate strategic game on par with other deep military simulations. So they're kind of speaking a language of mine that I am partial to, these RTSs. And a Terminator-style game sounds intriguing, because I do like that franchise. Yeah. Even if it's really the first 2 movies that carry that entire name with Arnie. I think everyone genuinely agrees after that they go off the boil a bit. Like the 3rd one wasn't all that, and then they even did that one with that fucking Dragon Queen that was in... Well, I felt like that's one of the few films I fell asleep watching around Biff's. It was part of that Terminator film. The other film I fell asleep watching, just in general, was that Jungle Book, that real life person one they did. That's so bad. Anyway, Terminator Dark Fate. I know you're probably not interested in this, but What do we do with this franchise? Is an RTS a good place to go with it? A strategic game, or do you want an open world survival game, which I am told is being in the works? So you got all sorts. Where is it? How has this survived?
I was just thinking about this question. We said, what do we want from it? I was like, do I really want anything from it? Like, really? 1984 or something it started, and we're still doing it 40 years later in games. I mean, look, it's a bit of a cult, like, following for it. Like, and no one dislikes Terminator. Like, we've even referenced it in this with Skynet appearing, ironically. Clever. So,
I mean, ahead of its time, some will say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably why it carries it, because you go, well, actually, I wouldn't say living through it, but you see more and more of the stuff cropping up IRL, didn't you?
It's a disaster.
Literal nuclear bombs going off. No.
Well, with that Putin lurking, who knows?
Can he be trusted, any of them?
Is he Skynet? Is he actually not real?
An actual Terminator
He
underneath.
might be.
Don't know. Look at
like
that Joe Biden.
Wow.
That's all I'm saying.
That's a puppet, if nothing else.
I don't know what I want from it, because I think, how cool would it be to like actually play a campaign of that original story or whatever, even from both sides.
Yeah,
I mean, there's got to be something there, but really, it's like when we discussed that Indiana Jones the other day. Like, is there really that, like, beyond our age, if you like is there really that much interest in it, or is it for like late 20s and up, or 30 and up? Do you know what I mean? I kind of wonder how much it would carry it, but I think there's obviously still some developers that feel like they've got something they want to do with it, but I don't know. I wonder whether it's worth carrying it on. Some things are just better left, aren't they?
If you come up with an idea, in this case it's a real-time strategy game, if you came up with an idea for one, would you be tempted just to try and attach it to some sort of license like Terminator that's got some sort of name cachet, knowing that you're going to have to hand over some capital up front, or either per sale, however the deal's worked out, just because it's worth having that, because you know it'll get some level of traction? Or do you just go, look, completely unique, I'll make my own robots, my own Skynet, let's call it GroundNet, and go that way and see if we can get 100% of the proceeds? Or is it almost necessary for some of these games to have some sort of... I mean, they might do it because they love the franchise. That's also something that I think we sometimes don't think about, is the people making it might
maybe that's
just
how you get
it.
the funding for the game as well. Yeah. Like, because if they go, I've got this game about robots, and they go to Terminator, and you go, well... No. They go, well, it's Terminator or nothing. You go, well, all right. If it'll get this over the line, I'll do it Terminator. Yeah. But even when you look at that Helldivers and those bots,
well, they are
automatons are T100s or whatever. I can't remember what it is now.
I think they might be 800s.
Yeah.
Because T1000 is that liquid fuck Robert Patrick, isn't it? Agent Doggett from X-Files.
Digging. So, I think that it could be an element of both, but I just wonder why we're still dealing with it. Like, if there was a new film out or something like that to sort of jump on the hype bandwagon with, but as I say, you kind of like, they've tried to redo it so many times, and every time I watch it, I go, what are we doing? Why are we digging this up? And then randomly a game comes out of nowhere that John's crapping on.
Well, he didn't understand it, did he? Bless him. Trying to find which Terminator model Arnie was. T800. There we go. Yeah. I was right. See, but that's not even... I'm not even close. I don't follow the franchise at all. I've watched the first two films, the second one, about 50 times, to be fair, when I was younger, but not in half a decade. And it's not like I'm obsessed with this franchise, but that's just somehow burnt into my brain, it would seem.
Yes, I think most people would. I mean, Ronnie's pretty good at retaining this sort of stuff anyway, whereas Steve, as we know, is a lot poorer at doing that.
No, well, it can happen.
Yeah, I mean, again, could be a good game. Arguably, the score dictates at the moment that it is a good game.
It's in that.
If you're interested in
it's in that region, so I'll be having a look at that. I keep saying this, and I never do. Another license to Star Wars Dark Forces Remaster, the Pac-Man game again, sitting on an 81. This is a remaster, obviously, as the name dictates, an old school FPS. What's this piglet doing? Oh, yeah. Don't you be doing that. Licking things off the floor. Where are we? Let's do Robert Jones from PC Gamer. Yeah. A great remaster of a beloved if now very old school FPS that is handled with great care and attention. And I think that's all you can hope for when these, because there'll be Dark Forces fans that were thinking, don't know if we need this or want this because you might crap on it, but it feels like they've done a really good job with the. Done a really good job with the with just the remaster part of it and kept it true. And like I said, an 81's a pretty good score, and Salmon will be relatively happy with that, I think. Any thoughts?
Agreed. I think you're always looking for that plus 80 score, right? Ideally in that Grand Prix. So
this came out in 1995.
I don't.
In that stage, it must be a remake, surely.
Well, this is the thing. There's an ideal sweet spot between a remaster and a remake. And I don't think 30 years is the best idea for a remaster. But it must have done a lot of work to it. Those fucking old school shooters as well. Can you imagine Doom remastered?
Yeah.
You'd be like, cool.
I mean, they have done that. I think they've re-released it several times.
They must have done.
And Quake.
It must have been done. Yeah. With better frames and stuff like that. But I don't know if that does the job. But what do I know? I'm not really interested in. I say I'm not really interested in replaying old foot. I am, but it depends what it is, and I'm not sure those older versions age that well.
No,
if I'm honest.
Well, as long as you're up front with it and not trying to claim it's 2024 levels of interaction, I think you can get away with it. I would like to see more older games come back. I mean, they've just done those Tomb Raider games, which are from the 90s, which. I mean, FPSs I feel like aged a little bit better, ones that are especially on PC. But third-person 3D stuff, difficult to get your head around in some ways.
I don't know if there's anything I'm particularly asking for. I'm trying to think, what... Do you know one that I would like is just Gran Turismo?
OG?
Yeah, just OG Gran Turismo remastered or done in a way that it's actually playable. The amount of times I've sunk into that, the amount of time I sunk into it, getting that Pikes Peak. Don't know if you ever did that.
I remember it.
Remember it. So but then I wonder if I actually played it, whether I'd go, cool. That's the trouble. Do I really want it? Don't know.
We'll see. Anyway, for those fans of Dark Forces, it looks like you've got a decent remaster sitting on an 81. You can go away and enjoy that. In terms of the Grand Prix scores, this is how it stands. You've got Biff at number 1, 7 games out, 510 points. Adcock number 2, 5 games out, 420 points. So that's a disaster. It's 90 points off of Biff with 2 extra games you can play with. So Biff is in trouble, it looks like, unless others have absolute blowers. Salmon in 3rd place, 3 games out, 248 points. Adkins, 2 games out, 171 points. Parky, 1 game out, 78 points. Hall, 0 games, -5 points because he's still got to get rid of that blank. And the transfer window is officially open as we record this. So people will start flooding that in. We'll try and keep up to date with that on the next editions of Idle Game Chat for sure. What is this bully doing? He's not happy. Look, that's all I had for the episode, really. Called it off. We've got a longish impression session of Cyberpunk Ultimate Edition, which has been recorded. So that's going to go on there. So it's going to be still a decent sized episode. I will say this. I was trying to get this review done, yeah? And I got this. Would be helpful if some of these other turds helped out of reviews. He's getting annoyed.
Not getting annoyed. I think... Come on.
They're not going to. The reason I brought it up is because when this inevitably crumbles, this podcast, you'll be able to take some of the blame now because people will be like, oh, he was getting pissy.
It's not crumbling.
Well,
it's absolutely never crumbling.
I will crumble it.
I'm more as well thinking, other people's perspective is better than just mine, is where I'm at on it. Variety is the spice of life.
Maybe.
And who said that? Gandhi?
I don't know if that was him. I don't know what he said. He said a lot of things.
Right. Well, he definitely didn't say that, but it was him or Einstein, I reckon. So, yeah.
They've both said a lot of things.
I think get someone else's perspective at times would be a good thing. is my position on it. But as always, it's
but
an independent endeavour.
That's like asking fucking Paul Merson to take Jeff Stelling's old job. Like, Merson's there to provide awful commentary on what's going on. Jeff's there to just manage the ship, get things over the line, get the right questions asked, keep the show going. Yeah. So it's a certain skill that you have that I feel like if I was to put some other pisshead in, it would be like Merson sitting there trying to get things going. It would fall apart after 10 minutes. So that's what has to be considered.
Who knows?
Anyway, go on.
Actually enjoyed our Cyberpunk chat, though. It was interesting because that one specifically I've kind of always stayed on the sidelines for, and I was actually curious to get your perspective on it and see what state that game's in. What I would say is the overall game wasn't as I expected. So I'm not saying the scoring, I'm just saying the feedback on the game wasn't what I expected, which I found interesting.
It was never going to, I just don't see how it's ever going to recover and be top tier, like top. I'm giving away the game a little bit here, but top tier. Because even like they've done a lot of work to make it up to an acceptable standard. Like even stuff that I didn't really talk about, like you see a lot of popping just driving around the city, like cars just dropping in and out randomly. Like there's a lot of scruffiness around it, which I think seems just inherently baked into the game. They can't do anything about. So yeah, it was a
AAA studio though.
Yeah, they are, but they didn't get there. But then again, I don't know. I've seen again that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I mean, that looks like it's so soft. The picture on performance mode, like it almost looks like a cartoon at times, which isn't a bad thing, but that's not how it should look.
That wasn't what they were doing.
No, and it's kind of like, do you put it on the quality mode and lose the frames, or do you just chuck it in there at performance?
I fucking hate that compromise.
Well, it has to be done now. They're not. This either that or you don't have it. You have Dragon's Dogma coming out, no performance mode, so you just lose the chance of it.
But I really don't know who's opting for resolution over frames. It really, really just is a really bizarre brain malfunction is all I can call it, that people think it's better. And I just don't get it. And I just don't think it's an appropriate thing to say, sacrifice all of that resolution so you can have it run. No, like it's just not acceptable now. Pack it in.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Anyway, Cyberpunk, what is it? 2077 Ultimate Edition, because it was with that DLC included, which comes with its pros and cons. That's what's going to close out this edition of Idle Game Chat. As usual, we will see you on the other side. Here we are then, back with some game impressions to close out this edition of Idle Game Chat. We've got apps here, joined by Logan, who's going to be managing the questions about Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition. That's what it's been packaged up and called. That's what I experienced, I believe. I mean, there's all sorts of different store pages and whatnot, but this seems like the closest to it. You basically get the base game and this Phantom Liberty DLC bundled in, and it's post all of the major fixes, I believe. So obviously I'll hand over to you. I've got a store page reference here to talk the nonsense if you want to hear what sort of marketing crap they spilled out, but I'll hand over to you and see if you can get some useful information out of this brain of mine. It's not operating at the moment.
Yeah, as we were discussing, I was literally just going through, like, off air. We were obviously discussing what this review does and all several different things like that. And I was just looking at the front page on OpenCritic, and I've noticed that IGN have reviewed it twice, right?
Right.
And one of them got a 4 out of 10 and one of them got a 9 out of 10.
Interesting. I mean, that does sort of tell a story of what the game was and perhaps what it is.
Well, this is what I thought, right? Because, and I don't mean to preload the review or anything, but the reason I've flagged this, right, and I don't know if they've gone back in and done something here or whatever, but the one that got a 9 out of 10, the one that got a 4 out of 10 was done on the 14th of December 2020, right, which must have been around when it come out.
Yeah, that's it. It was a late one in that year. They delayed it several times and just squeezed it out. And that's the
9 out of 10 which is from Tom Marks at IGN.
Yeah.
So the first one was from Destin Lagari.
Yeah.
Second one, Tom Marks at IGN, was done a week before, on December the 7th. So,
2020.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
Metro Game Central also gave it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, there's a few
Games
people.
Radar Plus gave it a 5-star review.
Some
Game
got caught
Informer
out.
9 out of 10.
So here's what
It's
happened.
interesting though, isn't it?
Here's what I remember from that time period. Is this happened because this actually, I think it cost Adkins the Grand Prix. Chappers won it because initially the game came out and got a 91 on OpenCritic average about a week before its release.
Yes.
What had transpired was that they'd only given out code for PC at that point, which appeared to be the best shape of the game. It appeared to be the least, the version of the least amount of problems. It wasn't until the console slops got their hands on it that the seams started coming undone, from what I remember. That's where a lot of the bugs were housed within the console editions. Like the last gen, the PS4 and Xbox One editions were a total disgrace. Even so much so now, even on the PlayStation Store, it says, what does it say here? Important, Cyberpunk 2077 base game is available on PlayStation 4. This version received its last patch on the 8th of November 2022. It is no longer supported. There's even another part in another store, the page says we don't recommend you buy this version. So they're still flagging these last gen versions of it.
I'm surprised they didn't pull it. Like
They did.
I remember it being that bad.
Sony did. It came off the storefront for a while. You couldn't buy it, and you could get a refund, which you don't usually get, like widespread refund offers, particularly on like PSN. But yeah, they weren't happy with it. They may have just done it as a publicity stunt to put rockets up our asses. But yeah, it was one of those. Like I would, if I was guessing, I'd believe that review from the week before was the PC version, and then the 4 out of 10 was a console version. I wouldn't have thought it would have been the Xbox One or PS4, because people don't tend to review last gen stuff typically. But even on the PS5 and Xbox Series X, it wasn't. It went up to snuff.
Right. So I've literally just opened up the review. It said, while I had just as much fun playing Cyberpunk on PC as Tom did playing for his review, on the base PlayStation 4, Xbox One, it's a different game entirely.
It was,
so
it was
literally
last gen, right?
Yeah, immediately. And it says here the Xbox One PS4 version is nearly unrecognisable compared to PC. So yeah, your memory is completely right, and they're basically Destin has absolutely crapped on it for that revelation a week later. But it's interesting. I think a lot of people, like I have as well, kind of forget some of the backstory to how all of this happened, and it got to the point where you got to, and the game got to, where you thought, you know what, we'll play that now because it's actually in an acceptable condition. But the point was, back then, everyone was very hyped for this game. It was like, obviously,
it was
in the midst of COVID, and it's kind of like everyone wanted something good to play and distract themselves from all the noise and things that were going on. And then this happens, and it's kind of like interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge disappointment. Absolute because I mean, The Witcher 3 came out and that was excellent. What was that, 2015 maybe?
Yeah.
And this was like CD Projekt Red's next big game, and it was new setting, new franchise, etc. There's a little bit of alarm bells because people were complaining about being first person. Then I think they cut back on any of the third person cinematic, so it was all done through first person via that, which actually adds to the game, I think, in hindsight. Keeps it kind of nicely immersed. But other than that, no one was expecting what happened. And especially after the first week, 91's come rolling in. You think, well, they've done it again almost. And slowly but surely, the cloak and dagger approach where only giving out that code to the PC would have worked for week 1, but as soon as it got out there in the wild and the other versions were played, it became apparent there was some very serious issues with it. Now, there are people that played through it on the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. Adkins played through it on the console close to launch and said it was bad, but wasn't unplayable. So I think a lot of the absolute stinking outrage came from those PS4 and Xbox One versions, but it just didn't function. Like, it would just run at like 22 frames a second. It was crashing all the time, etc. Certainly wasn't perfect elsewhere, but that was the other extreme of how bad it was. The whole conversation around the game got completely just poisoned. That well got absolutely poured in with poison. You couldn't really get a grip of actually what was going on. So at that point, I was like, well, you got to walk away from this at some point.
And to be fair, they did commit quite heavily to sorting it out. I mean, they had no choice. It was, as you say, it was there was so much poison and so much bad press and reviews, and like as you say, the difference in experience. Everyone was just like, "Well, I ain't going to risk it. It's it ain't worth it." And because they committed so heavily to doing something with it, it kind of made sense to hold off. I think it took longer than I thought it would for them to like fully quote unquote resolve it. And then by then, you sort of, to a certain extent, the hype's gone, other stuff's cropped up and come out, a year or two later, and you think, well, does this still make it on the menu? And it's obviously one that you'd pinpointed. You love CD Projekt Red. I mean, Witcher 3 is probably up there with one of your favourite games ever.
Yep, absolutely.
If not top of the list near it. So this was a natural one that I expected you to be sniffing around at the right time. But yeah, it is interesting to see it crop up all this time later. So I suppose you saw this Ultimate Edition, everything packaged in, and it was the game that you were looking for and the right time to jump in, I assume.
Yeah, well, the base game I already had because Adcock somehow came across a code through various sources and whatnot. And he said, I'm never going to play it. Will you ever play this? And this was like 2021, quite early. And I was like, well, yeah, I'll have it because I think if they sort it, I do want to go and play this. But I'm just going to bide my time. So as long as you're comfortable with me sitting on it for a few years, potentially. I mean, I didn't know at this time. And he was like, yeah, you'll play it one day. So it doesn't really matter. I just know I definitely won't. And I was like, okay. So once that happened, I was like, okay, it's sitting there waiting. And there was this sort of this next gen patch, I think they were referring to it as, that a lot of people were saying that this is going to fix the game mostly. So I kind of waited for that. That rolled around, and then we'd already known about the Phantom Liberty coming as a DLC package. And I thought, you know what, I might as well just wait for that to come out. And I did. And then once that was out, it was downloaded and ready to go. And it was just a case of finding a slot, knowing that this was going to be quite a meaty game. And away we went. Unfortunately, that was after another couple of patches after the Phantom Liberty come out. And I think they've pretty much said that we're done with supporting it at that sort of level. It's going to be maybe minor stuff, but we've done everything we need to do on the roadmap. It's ready to go. So pretty good timing at the turn of the year to start this one up. And yeah, interesting to finally get through it and see what all the fuss is about and have thoughts about this occurrence. But really, I only had to pay out for the Phantom Liberty, which was 20 something quid. So that was it's 25 quid. I think I got it on for 15% off. It was some sale that was going on over Christmas, and I was like, okay,
thank you.
I'll take that, and we'll get through it. Like I said, it's taken a long time to get here. It's been I think it was like an 89 hours. My save was, and that save wasn't countering in all sorts of nonsense. I was up to reloading and doing other like experimenting and stuff. There's probably
only like in game.
Yeah,
time.
Exactly. Of that save. So the times that I would reload to do something else or to test something were not counted. So yeah, it was a slightly larger commitment than I thought was going to happen. But sometimes you get into these things and you think, well, I might as well clear down what I can. And then before you know it, you've done almost everything.
The Witcher was a long game though, so it's I don't know if that's fair. I don't know if it's fair to. I don't want to keep drawing comparisons, but they did. That was quite an in-depth game, I suppose, wasn't it? So
I think in what I'd heard was Cyberpunk's main quest line actually isn't that long, and I think that's true. It's difficult for me to really sit here, hand on heart, and say that is true. But I did when I got to the point, and it kind of, is in many games these days. It's like, right, it's going to ramp up now. So if you do what you want, do what you want to do, and then come back when you're ready. Most people push on. I was like, oh, okay. That didn't feel that long. In fact, I was just like going back through what I would consider were the main missions, excluding the DLC really, because that wasn't part of that sort of generic first run. I was thinking, the base game, like if you had just the base game, you could burn through that in 30 hours, I reckon, if not a bit shorter than that. But the supplementary content, the Phantom Liberty itself's a good 20 hours on its own, maybe 15 if you were to main crit that. And then all the other side content. And I didn't even do all of the side content. There's like a lower level job system, which I sort of dabbled in, was like, I can see one day doing this, but today's not that day, but all side quests that I was able to find were done. What I'd consider that came up and were categorised like that, and these things called gigs were done about 15 or 20 of them. There's almost 100, I think, of those lurking. So it's again, you sometimes just shake your head and you go, I don't need. Well, part of that is like you build up your money doing that, but you become so ridiculously affluent in this game just by selling guns that you pick up that actually you don't need to ever consider that. I think there's probably a balancing problem there. I think the Phantom Liberty, not to jump the gun too much, kind of adds to that because it gives you access to stuff earlier, depending on what order you play it in, that you probably wouldn't have access to, and it's high level shit. And you start selling that at 3,000 a pop, and before you know it, you've built up enough to buy the big apartment that you didn't think you'd ever afford. So it's certainly some. That happens with most RPGs, I think. Though, like eventually you become so rich that money is of no consequence.
Objects.
Yeah, and I remember that happening in even like GTA. Eventually, you're just like, well, it's there's not really a problem here. I suppose it's better to be that way rather than you're constantly poor. You want to better just enjoy the game, but yeah, it's kind
of always an initial graft, I think, and then you reach a point where you find the optimum way of generating cash or whatever it is. You don't need to spend as much, and it all just starts sort of accumulating, as you're saying. That is quite a common thing to happen. But interesting though. I saw a lot of hype around this. A lot of people were back streaming it over the Christmas period or just before it. Like a lot of the big streamers were all over it and seemed to be thoroughly enjoying it as well. So it did seem to me like it was actually quite nice, like an arc of redemption. Like and we've said it before, like it's a lot of games get tarnished and thrown in the fucking bin pile because they don't come out in the right state. And I think it's good now that they continue to work on stuff and release the game that they want to. I mean, arguably it's like, well, don't release Turk. Like we said that before, just keep delaying it. But at some point they have to get something out, and it's never going to be a perfect and exact science. But it's good that I feel like they got some redemption from this game. I don't know whether I always struggle with which way to look at it, because I kind of think don't release shit is my first initial response, and you should be punished for that. But at the same time, you should also be, I wouldn't say rewarded, but a little pat on the back for actually getting it to be the game that they intended, arguably.
It's tricky because it's sort of like second prize, isn't it? Like the second prize is that the game's eventually probably up to snuff from a technical perspective. But ideally, as we said, when that comes out first time at full price, you want people to be happy with what they've purchased, and clearly a lot of people were not. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, look, we can't rewrite the history books. That stain is always going to be there for them. But what we can say is in 2024, at a minimum level of technical competency, it's there. So if you were interested in the game and were just scared off, rightly so, by all the issues, they're largely resolved. In fact, I think I had the game crash once in 90 odd hours, probably pushing 100 hours. So not great. It still crashed once, but there's far more what I'd consider potentially even more polished games out there that have had more crashing. We talked about that Spider-Man Remastered a little while ago. Kept fucking shitting out on me, and that's a remastered version of a game. So
yet to be discussed, but I had Spider-Man 2 crapping out on me multiple times.
Wow.
I did wonder whether some of it was the quick resume piece on it. I didn't really like it, but don't give it to me then. If it ain't going to work, I don't want it. So
to be fair, you said quick resume. I think the time it crashed was after I'd resumed it from quick resume. And I don't usually do that. I think by accident I left it on. I was like, I'll just play for it. And then within a couple of hours it had gone bloop, and I was like, hang on, I had it on that quick. I don't be trusting that quick resume. I know I
think it caches too much, and then it gets all caught out by how much it's cached, and it runs out of memory and craps out. I reckon that's what it does.
Yeah. I try not to use it, but
can't be trusted.
No.
Anyway, shall we get into a review then and talk about your experience of the game? Do you want to start off with said store page?
Yeah, there's a lot of dross on here, but let's give it a go.
About the key bit.
About the game. Cyberpunk 2077 is an open-world action-adventure RPG set in Night City. A city obsessed with power, glamour, and body modification. Players V, a cyberpunk mercenary, and take on the most powerful forces in the city in a fight for glory and survival. Legends will be made here. What will yours be? Now, V is a character that you build. So it's not like The Witcher where you're handed Geralt and you're like, look, you're going to be Geralt. You choose what flavour of Geralt you are with your responses. You can change his hair occasionally, but that's it. V is a character that you can make male, female, or whatever you like, in fact. Change all the looks throughout the game. You can change the hair. You can completely change gender halfway through if you want. You can change the voices. Everything's there to be edited. And too much choice for me. I don't really like getting snarled up in it, so I just hit randomise until I found a base that I could work off of and a direction to go with, and went with male V as a nomad. There's 3 starting storylines you can choose: nomad, corpo, and street rat. I tried out all 3 of them just to see which one I kind of liked, and instincts were right. Nomad was the one for me to set that up. Next, the Ultimate Cyberpunk 2077 experience. That's just patting themselves on the bank. In the Ultimate Edition, immerse yourself in every story the world of the dark future has to offer, featuring every gameplay update and all previously released content in one package, including the acclaimed spy thriller expansion, The Phantom Liberty. Create your own cyberpunk, become the urban outlaw elite with cybernetic enhancements, and build your legend on the streets of Night City. There's a lot of toss after that. It is an interesting one they've put in there. Decide how the story ends. Your choices in the base game and the spy thriller adventure. They love that, don't they? Spy thriller adventure. Phantom Liberty will create interweaving webs of consequences, ones that shape the fate of characters around you and your own. So they've chucked that in as a selling point.
It's a right load of old word salad, that.
Yeah.
Doesn't really give you that much, I'd say. It's just a lot of words. But I think basically you pick who you are, your background, and then crack on with it.
Yeah, it's first person, which will upset some people. And because
I feel like it should have been third. I don't know why.
Well, that's what a lot of people have said. But actually, it works pretty well as first person. It really does remind me of... It goes third person when you get in a vehicle, actually. You've got that option. So it's kind of a blend of games. You've got a GTA influence there. It's more like GTA than it is The Witcher in many ways, because you're in a city driving around and there's that sort of carnage that unfolds. It feels point to point like a Grand Theft Auto or an open world city game than it would be The Witcher. But then the first person elements bring you grounded to more like a Bethesda game, you know, like a Fallout or perhaps a Starfield or whatever that might be from, you know, Skyrim. That always being in first person is an interesting kind of take and brings you into that kind of area. And then all the cyberpunk and the cybernetic enhancements just completely screams Deus Ex to me. So you've got this blend of different sort of video games that have come before it, and you get Cyberpunk 2077, and it still retains a lot of the good stuff from The Witcher as well. You know, the character work, the conversations, the building of relationships during the game are still retained, but it's just in a completely different setting with completely different combat rules and engagement, and really in a lot of elements pulls it off. I've got a few, probably mostly Ronnieisms. You know, a lot of people will be rolling their eyes when they hear one of the complaints for sure, but there's a lot of good stuff to say about Cyberpunk 2077, and the Ultimate Edition does have that Phantom Liberty expansion in there as well. But yeah, that's a sort of a high level look at it, I guess.
So I'm trying to think of the best place to start with this. Why don't you talk through... I mean, look, you've mentioned it's a blend of some very good video games, and there's a whole wide range of influences that sound really positive. Why don't you start with some of the things that you just really enjoyed about the game, and talk through some of the progression elements? Because I have to be honest, I haven't seen a whole lot of this game, and I've only seen a little bit of it, and I actually don't know too much around what the objective is and what you're actually trying to do.
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to start this. We'll deal with the narrative, definitely, because that's where there's banana skins being trod on as far as I'm concerned. But in terms of the stuff I like, let's start with what is definitely a Ronnieism, a very small thing, but I just like this is in the game. Okay, so you have your own apartment that you go back to. You know, you don't have to even go there, really. Some of the missions ask you to go back there to do something like maybe make a phone call or something like that. But really, you don't have to engage with any of this. But in the apartment, you can sort of wander around. Your stash is in there, so you can change your loadout or your weapons or your clothing, all this sort of good stuff.
Yeah.
You've got a bed there that you can sleep on to pass time. There's a shower even that you can do, and you can take part, and you can change the look of your character in the mirror, all that sort of stuff. When you go to sleep and shower, it buffs your character. So there's a reason to role play in that sense. There's a reason to go back to your apartment once every while, get some sleep in, have a shower in the morning, maybe have a coffee before you leave. It's almost that Red Dead Redemption 2 when you'd wander around that camp, do all the little chores of the day, have your stew, and then you go out for the day. Like, it had that element to it. And I was like, this is excellent, because it basically made sure that I went back every so often to just have that little role-playing element. Yeah, have that sleep, because it used to double, I think it was either double or it'd modify the XP up that you'd earn for 45 minutes of real time, which is about a quarter or maybe half a day. And I don't know what the shower did. I think it increased some sort of damage buff that you had. So as soon as I found this was going on, I was like, oh, that's great. Because normally they have it in there, and it's just there.
Token.
Yeah, it's just like, we can do it, but there's nothing that the game offers you. This is really going down the RPG element, where even small things like that can give you a little bit of a sneaky advantage. I mentioned the characters and the conversations and how that all kind of operates. That's all really good. You unlock new dialogue options by investing your points, as you would in any RPG game, into certain types, like archetypes. So you've got your strength. So the more points you invest in your strength, that will unlock kind of aggressive or ways to deal with things by just intimidating people, shutting them down and then going that way. You've got a technical one which will allow you to unlock dialogue about any technical issues you run into. And you can't get them all, you can't max them all out, so you kind of do have to pick and choose where you're going to focus things. And that plays in nicely to the characters and the conversations that you can have. And, if you replayed it again, you could choose a different focus and get a different outcome, get different bits and pieces. Like there's some quests that I saw there was an option to change the quest outcome, but I didn't have the relevant points into that area. And I was like, I wonder how that would play out if I did that. So it kind of gives you those nice questions. Really, though, it's got all the RPG elements, like the upgrades and the cybernetics that you do are really cool. You can do all manner of turt in there. You can put mantis blades on your arm and just carve people up. You can put what they call gorilla arms on, which are just used for punching people's heads out. Then you can add, electricity to that and do all this sort of stuff. And there's tons of stuff for your guns. There's tons of stuff for your actual body, armor, all these little perks and different bits and pieces that you can do. It's almost too much in many ways. Like if you sat there and tried to go through it all and come up with an ultimate build, you'd be there for hours, but you just kind of pick what seems to be best at that time. The game tries to keep you out of ceiling, though. There's like a certain number of points that you can invest, and if you go over this limit, you start to take debuff damage, like your health reduces per point you go over, and this ceiling raises as you go through the game and level up. So it's kind of like it's there to help you progress and make sure you don't just front load at the very beginning. So you've got to keep an eye on that. Really, though, there's two stars of the show. One is the city itself. Like Night City is just this cool, vibe of a place. Like it's an absolute shithole. Don't get me wrong. Like it is just, yeah. I don't know how people are living there. In all honesty, it's just carnage. There's just even in the notes it says the police don't really get involved with people's business. If you're fighting with someone, they'll let you just duke it out. Whoever wins wins. They're only there to stop like crimes against the city, basically. But if you're out there having a gunfight against some gang, they'll be like, well, not interested in that. You get on with it, and whoever survives gets to carry on with that. But the city itself's got this really cool vibe. The music and the soundtrack add to that, certainly. And Night City is a character in itself. And then really the other one, which I was not expecting at all, is just the combat. Like the combat itself is really, really good. It's better than it has any right to be. You come from The Witcher 3, which actually the combat largely seen as the most disappointing part of that game. Like the sword combat, pretty basic. Like it's serviceable, but wasn't exactly interesting or challenging for many people. And look, this isn't challenging, but it feels fucking good. Roaring around with those guns, you can go for the shotgun approach, steam in there, buff all your body up and your strength stats up so you can take more damage, and just go in there shotgunning people's faces off. Get a sniper rifle out, you can do that. Or you can go full hacking, invest points in these little hacking modules that are used to disrupt the enemies and you can insta knock out people and do all that sort of stuff. The one part where it doesn't quite come together is the stealth. Like, it's not one of these games that necessarily encourages it, but if you were building towards a stealth kind of playthrough, which I did go for, it got tricky at times because it's a little bit hit and miss. Like, first person stealth is just, it's a tough one, because in theory, if you can see them, they should be able to see you, and that makes it really difficult to kind of balance. And there's a few times when I got seen, I was like, no, I'm not having that. Reload that. That's a silliness. And other times when blatantly I should have been seen and wasn't. So I wouldn't recommend a stealth approach. I'd just recommend just committing to this carnage run of just weapons and finding what you want, because that's where it really comes into its own. But those are some of the definite good points. And questing and missions are relatively good, I'd say. As I said, it's mainly, again, more about the people you meet and finding out about them and their backstory and whatnot. And but yeah, I would say the combat was really, really surprising, because I wasn't expecting that out of CD Projekt Red. They don't, first-person game, first of all, you know, it's a different perspective, and they've got this really satisfying gunplay going, like really good. And you almost, once you start upgrading your cybernetics, you can dash around and climb up things, and you're scaling, you know, small platforms and using that to your advantage. It really does start to unlock a lot more options for you. A little double jump in there as well if you want it, or a boost jump. You can choose either of those or choose to have none. So again, has all these kind of different options to approach things. You can sneak in through the side, or you can go in through the front door. Either way, once it kicks off, you can have some fun just carving through the enemies. It's interesting. It was hilariously easy, though. I will say that. Like, at one point, I just thought I'm never going to die, and I didn't for the rest of the game. So, if you want a challenge, there are higher difficulties. I just had it on normal. I think there's 2 above that. So, if you want the challenge, go in for those higher ones, because you'll just walk all over it after a little while.
Just going to say, it's interesting that these games don't always just play to that kind of carnage approach. I think there's this thing where it's kind of like, oh, you can play it how you want. And it's like, well, yeah. And even in, you know, and I hate to bring it back to Spider-Man, but even then they've at times obviously felt the need to put this like stealth. It's like the fun part of some of these games is the carnage, is the combat, is the hand-to-hand, the feeling overpowered and powerful. And that's what makes it fun. And sometimes I think if they give you stealth, you think, oh, that's how they want me to do it. Otherwise, they just encourage me to be this brute or doing it. And you kind of feel obliged to do that, because sometimes in these sort of games, or in games in general, they don't give you enough to be overpowered, and then you get caught cold. You sort of get caught in this halfway house.
Yeah. There is a bit of a I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but I have heard the criticism that Cyberpunk ends, like, I mean, in terms of like a quest or a mission, ends with just too much combat. I think people wanted a few more sort of passive, non-aggressive outcomes to be an option, but really just most of the time you're just going to have to kill and fight people. Like, and I know that a lot of RPG players love the whole non-lethal or non-killing run-throughs that games sometimes offer you. I'm not even sure you could do that in this, because it's just... whether you've been as stealthy or as light-footed or done all the right dialogue choices, sometimes it's going to chuck you into a situation where it's all kicking off and you've got no choice but to fight your way out of it. And I think that wound a few people up who want to have a bit more of a passive kind of look. And I do prefer that, personally. But once you kind of just accept that's how the game's going to be, you might as well just lean into it and start to go with that. Like, it's definitely a strength they wanted to show off, but ultimately... people who wanted ultimate choice of every outcome of every quest, I don't think you're going to get that here. You're going to have to do your fair share of bloodletting, I think, and get that out of your system.
I'd much rather just be all out carnage, because I think that's where some of these games are just the most fun. And it's like you've got all this cool stuff to do, and you kind of, I find it interesting, like, for all this cool stuff, and you want to be like non-lethal. It's like, it's and I get it. You kind of want an element of, I use it when I can or have to, sort of thing, maybe, rather than just because I can, I will. But yeah, it's interesting. And I suppose that everyone's got a slightly different play style. And a lot of games have to cater to that. I mean, you know, everything that we play, you and I both tend to operate different things and go for different things that buzz how we want to play the game. So, you know, it's hard to criticise it for it. But so you've alluded to some of the things that you liked. Now, we discussed beforehand there was obviously Ronnieisms perhaps that you didn't like. Do you want to talk to some of the less enjoyable elements or the frustrations for Ronnie? Because I think that's where I always revel to see what he's picked out in the game.
Well, the one that annoys me the most is these time skips that can't be seemingly avoided. So what I mean by that is that you will start a mission at 12 p.m. and then without any sort of contextual change in game, it'll be 8 o'clock in the evening. And what the game wants you to do is start at 8 o'clock. That's what it wants you to do. It wants you to go there around 8 o'clock and start it then. But if you don't, it just skips you forward. That I can manage because I think, okay, I'll come out of that, backing out of that mission. I'll just go and do something else till 8 and try and time it, if that makes sense. I'm fine with that. And sometimes it'll even tell you, go at this specific time or this specific time of night or daytime. It'll give you something, some sort of guidance to go to because the game wants to be at a certain daytime setting. I don't know what it is, probably for atmosphere, whatever. So I'm okay, I'm fine with that. But there's a couple of missions where it's just unavoidable. Like you just cannot time it. Like one that started at 9 p.m, you go there and it would cycle forward to 9 p.m, or you couldn't start it until 9 p.m. It's one of those ones. So if you got there early, it pushed to 9 p.m. If you got there later, you'd start after 9 p.m. and you'd already be there. During that mission, it runs to about 2 a.m, you know, because it takes that while to do. When you end it, it goes back to 10 p.m. somehow. What are we doing? How's that happening? Why is that a thing? Why is that a thing when I've exited the mission that it's gone back in time?
So it's almost got like open world time and mission time.
Yes.
And they're not linked.
They're not linked, no.
Almost.
And sometimes they don't even have a time, which I don't mind. It actually freezes time. I noticed, I was watching, I was like, that time's not moving. Which I'm not against that, because that makes sure that you're kind of synced up a bit better. But the time when it rolled back and went backwards in time, I was like, well, hang on a minute. What are we doing? Because there's no way you could do that mission quick enough for it to make sense. It would always cycle you back a few hours. I was like, that's really irritating. So that is Ronnieism. Most people won't even know that's happening and won't care for it. It's just jarring sometimes when you sit there in a truck with someone, it's daytime, and you come out of the scene, it's dead of night, and you're like, oh. So a lot of my time was spent fucking managing that. And even so much though, after I finished the game, I was like, I can't be the only one that this drives mad. So I went onto that Bile Factory Reddit. You always find some other weirdo on there. Someone's created a whole thread, right, or whatever you'd call it, where they have a walkthrough of the game where there's no time skips. All time skips are avoided. I don't know if it includes the mission I'm talking about, because that was one of the DLC ones. I don't know if it had that updated, but essentially it'll walk you through what time to do this quest, when's good to go and do this quest, etc, etc, etc. When's good time to... I think one of the modifiers they put in was you sleep at your apartment every night, like as you would probably in real life. So they've taken it one step further and offered a full sort of role-playing guide to get around the nonsense that's going on. So you can say it's only me, but there's others out there lurking. A lot of comments in there was like, why have you done this? There's so much effort put into it. I was really astounded. I was like, wow, that is so much effort to work out and go through.
That's the next level Ronnie, that is.
Yeah, that means...
I do get it. Look, I don't know if I'd be that bothered by it, that I would try and actively work around it. But it does annoy me when it... Because there was a couple of times when I've played Spider-Man 2 again, and it did exactly the same thing. Like, just tell me... Give me the option. Say, do you want to skip forward or do you want to come back at night?
Yeah.
Because then, as you say, it does the same thing. It kind of like switches you around, and you go, well, it just looks a bit weird.
It's sloppy.
I think it's noticeable.
It's carelessness. I'll tell you what, I'll be happy to do away with any sort of time. This has a clock, so you can see exactly what time it's supposed to be. Just do times of day, or just do evening, day, afternoon.
Come back when it's at night. Come back in the night when it's...
Exactly, and then you haven't got to worry about it. When you start putting actual time clocks in there, it was just an irritant. So
what was it that you started all that? Sega game?
Sega game?
Yeah. Where it was that you had to do everything at a certain time, RPG game.
Christ. Did you play it?
No. Like, was it... You'd know it. Shenmue.
Oh, Shenmue.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, I remember that. I didn't play it. I didn't, but yeah, I remember that.
That was one of the biggest ones for like doing things at a certain time, and there was obviously back then no mechanism
to skip
other than
forward,
sleeping
yeah.
to skip forward. So I think you might go to bed, you could skip forward 4 hours by sleeping, but you might then still have 2 hours to waste. So you'd have to wander around.
Look, I
doing
appreciate
pointless
the
shit.
commitment to it. If you're going to do it that way, I say.
They did, to be fair. Like
Yeah.
that was one of the big things for it. But
Yeah.
it's a difficult thing to balance. Because people go, I could sit here for 15 minutes while it passes 2 hours.
Yeah. Well, look, if you're going to do it, if you're going to have missions start at certain times, then make it easier.
Real-time clock.
A lot of the time, actually, and this is the annoying thing, actually, because sometimes it built in an option for you. Wait for Leslie or whoever's going to come around. And you go and sit like at a bar. It fades off and transitions to the right time, and they turn up, and it's like, I went to the bar for like that makes sense. But they didn't do it all the time. It was this inconsistency that it wasn't always an option. And I was like, this is a frustration now. So I definitely took that to heart way too much, but it was just an annoyance. I'm like, if you're going to do it, why are they so obsessed with things starting on time? Like, we want the atmosphere to be at night for this one. It's like, well, why? What does it matter? It's an open world game at the end of the day. Let me just go whenever I want. GTA solved it because they would skip. I don't know if you remember, you'd start a mission with like Michael, and then it would like skip the time. It would do like a little time lapse outside his house, and you'd see the sun go up and down. Then it would start the mission. It was like, okay, that works. But even that you could get tangled up, and if you chose the wrong character to start with, you wouldn't get that time lapse. So that was a concern that had to be ironed out. Anyway, that's one of the small things that annoyed me and took up way too much time. The other thing really is, and it's one of these, I think this is now becoming a bit of a sin, is the way in which and I was annoyed that they don't talk about it in the store page, because that's kind of like my limit for what to talk about specifically when it comes to narrative, and not what to sort of leave for the player to discover. It doesn't actually explain enough in depth for me to be comfortable doing it, so I'm not going to. What I will say is it commits that sin where the main quest's urgency in real life as a role-playing game would surely just usurp any other quest. Like, it's not even a question. And time and time again games do this. They fall into this trap of making a really urgent task the main quest, which obviously isn't going to be done in 2 quests. You're going to have to run through a decent string of time. But when you're sort of wasting your time doing races, you think, well, hang on a minute, the clock's ticking here in this game. The clock is ticking for my particular issue that I've got, and that just makes it a little bit. That takes me out of it almost completely sometimes, because it's like, you wouldn't be doing this. You'd be going after the solution immediately, and I don't know why they did that. I mean, I've got no idea why. I don't think it necessarily creates. I mean, it's interesting, but for me, it creates a problem of, where's my priorities lying? And then what makes it worse is you've got the DLC that comes along. Now, knowing that the DLC is just that, it's DLC, it was something added after the game, when part of the setup is a potential resolution to your issue, well, I know it ain't. So I know this was added after the game come out. So this, you kind of gives away the game a little bit, that DLC will be largely irrelevant. It's good, don't get me wrong. As a DLC package, it's really good. It's got a new area for you to go and explore that you can't access in the base game, like Dogtown. But narratively, I was like, well, this doesn't make... I know, because I know by the notion of this being a DLC, that whatever they're saying here ain't going to be what it is it? And, that's kind of how it all will play out. So that's all because this main quest is just set up in that way. And I don't think it talks about here, play as a mercenary and build your legend up and things like that. It's like, no, you don't even get a chance to do that. Like, completely accelerate you on this path. And this whole notion of, build your way up, become a legend. It's like, this is complete nonsense. It wouldn't make any sense to play it like that. So, yeah, a really strange way to create a game with so much content and yet really put the pressure on and say, look, this needs resolving. And you're like, well, I can tell by the hand that you've dealt me of cards, I know that needs resolving, but you've added 80 hours worth of extra content here. What do we do? So that is actually quite a big one for me, because that's an immersion stinker. That hurts.
You can't just go off and explore and do the things you want, because there's essentially time pressure in the quest to get that done.
There is no time pressure. That's the thing. The game doesn't pressure you with time. It doesn't actually force you to do that. But the way it's set up is there's time prep. Like if you were to role play,
narrative is
yes,
that.
yeah. But the games they're not stupid enough to actually do that. Can you imagine how annoying that would be for people?
Go here, do this. Go here now.
It wouldn't work. So they've done the right thing. Really,
the overarching narrative doesn't marry up with
the way the game plays out. No,
the gameplay.
Like I said, you're running around racing around the streets, and it's like, well, for
you
a quick
be
buck,
doing that.
I've got 800 grand in the bank. I don't need to be doing this. So you have to just kind of ignore that and just say, look, that's kind of how it is, and that's a bitter blow for me. I know they're planning some sort of sequel. I'd be interested to see what they do, how they do it, and what they go for. But you got Idris and what's his name, Keanu Reeves is the headline actors in this one. They both do a good job, as do all the other characters, as do those that are playing V. But yeah, the main quest and the main scenario you're put in is, to me, a problem for these type of games. But that again is probably a Ronnieism. Most people can just ignore that and get on with it. But I just do think there's something.
I don't like it. I don't know whether it's Ronnie seeping in, but I've had it in a few games lately where they go, "We need to go and do this now," and then there'll be some side quest that operates on the way there, and then I have this dilemma. You go, "You said this is urgent."
Yeah.
But you've got someone that wants this, and then I'm getting a phone call about that, and it's like, well, and I get it. Like, is that the idea? Like, for you as the protagonist to prioritize? But I just find it a bit. I like to do things at my pace and explore stuff, and have the option to choose. But it does feel weird when it's like, get over here. They'll go, get over here now, quickly before he's gone, and you go, well,
yeah. They gives you in this. So outside the main quest, which is what it is, it's set up, and it's like, that needs to be dealt with. Probably needs to be dealt with yesterday. That's how urgent it is. But with the side quest, often someone will ring you on the phone, and you can have the choice to say, "Okay, let's do that now." You can say, "I'll call you back." So that's really handy if you're trying to just sort of plan things out, and you don't want to get snarled up into it. You might have someone sort of whinging on the phone to you, but you're like, "Look, I haven't got time at the moment, but I will get to it." And they're like, "Oh, all right, as soon as you can." And that's fine. You're like, that could be a few days, can't it? Like, people have got other troubles to be getting on with. So they offer it in an option for that in the side areas. But yeah, main quest is one of those. I think even in Zelda, I said that for Breath of the Wild. It's that princess is trapped in that castle with Ganon. I mean, every day that we sort of piddle around out here looking for Kurok seed, she's getting God knows what's going on in there to her. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Well, that's part of the meta of the game. How long does it take? But
it's a freak. The thing is, a lot of these games have an element of urgency about them.
Yeah.
Like realistically at a base level, but it's how that's portrayed in the story that's key.
Yeah.
I just prefer them to say like, "Meet me over here," or "Next thing we've got to do is this, that, or the other." And then
there's ways around it. Other open world games don't. I mean, it's not every open world game that has this issue, but some do and some don't. It's a choice that's made to sting people. So it's it's one of those, unfortunately, which kind of does dampen the experience somewhat, because you can't really take what's happening seriously, and nor should you really, 'cause it's a video game. But you know what Ronald's like. Don't be liking it.
Indeed.
But
one thing I did mean to say at the beginning of the outset of this, I assume you played this on PS5?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, it was on PlayStation 5, so it was a console edition. And I've heard, I mean, the PC version looks great now. If you've got a good rig, it's almost like a different game looks wise, how good it is. But it holds up well. Nice 60 FPS mode is pretty stable, not 100%, but stable enough for you not to concern yourself with it. And I think I'd imagine the Series X is much the same. Like I said, the PS4 and Xbox One editions aren't even really supported nowadays, so I can't hand on heart recommend any of those editions if I'm honest. But if you've got
they
can't. No, they haven't. Yeah, even the Phantom Liberty is not available on PS4 or Xbox One, so you can't even get that on there. They did just pull the plug on that, which is probably the right thing to do. But yeah, ran fine. Like we had that one crash that I talked about. We'll blame Quick Resume for that. Or rest mode, whatever they call it on that PS5. And good stuff, great stuff, not so good stuff, some middling road stuff. It's a big old game. It's never going to hit the highs all the time, but overall does a good job, I'd say, at delivering what it was. Is it really special? Probably not, but it is worthwhile experience if nothing else.
Do you think it needed the big names like the Keanu and the Idris and stuff, or do you think that's just because I feel like they went down that route, and I kind of think like, so I always thought, oh, they must have seen something with Keanu Reeves, and I don't know if it was kind of a bit of a Matrix vibe or something that they wanted for it. But did you feel that that was necessary or added something?
I think it adds some star power for sure. Like hearing Keanu Reeves say the word cunt, just never would expect it. But there's dialogue where that happens, so you kind of like, that's actually just in itself quite hilarious. And yeah, I mean, Keanu's a weird one anyway, I think. Like, I'm not sure he's the greatest actor that's ever walked the earth. I mean, I think he
plays Keanu Reeves.
He plays, but
other than Bill and Ted, he basically plays the same.
Yeah, the way
character.
he's kind of inserted into this game is interesting, and he plays Johnny Silverhand, and he does a really good job. He definitely has his own vibe about him. He's different from other characters, and I think maybe that's just because I'm just familiar with Keanu Reeves, and you can't really shake that off. But it does work. And then Idris is classic Idris. He's put in a good shift, and you'll those that have seen him in previous work know that he does a good job. And here it's translated well to a video game, so they don't stand out as being bad or not. Some actors don't quite fit when it comes to video games. But they've done a good job, and it's not distracting, which I could see how it could be. Because I think it's largely a cast of unknowns, but they're not distracting. I think it does enhance the game in certain ways. So I think they were good picks, both of those. There's probably some other actors and actresses I'm not familiar with, but they're the headline ones.
They're voices that you instantly recognise.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I thought I'd ask because it's obviously it was a big part of the game.
Yeah, it was definitely the marketing.
Yeah, they definitely lent heavy on the Keanu Reeves element, so I thought I'd ask it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to call out before we sort of head into the gallery for the final execution?
No, I don't think so. I think I've said what I need to say. Yeah.
Okay. In which case, we go in there. Now,
well, do we?
I don't see... Well, yeah. With it...
Because
the bin's still there, isn't it? Or have you chucked the bin in the bin?
Bin's gone.
Bin's definitely gone.
Because we've got the botchling bin, which is for Biff, basically, when he stops playing a game before he's finished it. So he's had to have an old new bin outside. So revert back to doors being unlocked, I think.
All right. Well, I don't see a world in this doesn't go in. I've already made that decision for you.
Fair enough.
Those
time
I feel
skips
like it
might have killed it.
Ronnie taking it to the extremes.
Yeah.
I feel like it goes in.
Yeah, it does.
So really, it's over to you to decide where your 90-ish hours, or 90 plus hours, I should say, of Cyberpunk go in.
So Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition earns itself a nice solid silver. So probably people were hoping for gold. I mean, CD Projekt Red not happy there.
Yeah.
But
I thought it could get it. I thought it was in with a shout. It looked like I think obviously we were discussing it beforehand. The reviews of the original game weren't great, but Phantom Liberty did really well. So I thought that might swing it for you. Yeah. Do you think it's the Ronnie-isms that dragged it down a little bit?
I think so. I think it's just they are.
That's an unfair way to put it. I'm not saying it's you that's dragged it down, but those elements that sort of detract from the immersion kind of had a bit of an impact on how you felt overall.
I just think when you're offering a role-playing game, that the role-playing has to come kind of first, and it doesn't really, because there's those little bits that take you out of it. Like, you're going to create this beautiful world, put all this detail in it, create these wonderful characters to interact with, but then it doesn't gel well with a person playing a video game. Like, there's just these little inconsistencies, these time skips, the urgency of what the main quest is. And the Phantom Liberty, I think, actually, knowing it's DLC, it kind of slows the pacing down. Like, I was thinking if it took that out, it unlocked at about 40%, it said on that PlayStation gives that little percentage, doesn't it, on many games. Yeah. And at 40%, I started to get that, and I was like, well, one, obviously now I'm nowhere near the end of the game because of that, and I wouldn't have expected to because it felt quite early still. But like, that's a good 15, 20 hours, like I said, and that kind of dragged the pacing down a little bit. and then you get back onto the main quest, and got on the back that horse going again, and then before I knew it, it was time to wrap up if I wanted to. And I was like, oh, there's other stuff to be getting on with here. I'll go back and do it. And then they started drip feeding the side content out really slowly, because I'd obviously gone in such an order that it didn't quite unlock maybe all the different options. So I was sort of finishing a quest and thinking, right, is that it now? On the way to the main quest, to get a phone call. Oh, no, there's more. This happened for like another 5 hours. This kept going on for. I was like, right, so something's happened where maybe the ordering I've done it in isn't quite at peace with how it's been rolled out. No, but I got through it all in the end and gave it a good bit of time to make sure no one else is going to call before committing to sort of the final part.
Roaring around, waiting for a phone call.
Yeah, it was a bit of a time wasting exercise, but I genuinely enjoyed a lot of the quests. So I thought it's worth just giving it a chance here to see how some of this stuff plays out. But yeah, I mean, the combat's really good. As I said, the conversations, dialogue, tree choices, the RPG points and building your character are very good. Main quest's got a bit to be desired. But in the side quest, you'll meet some interesting characters and build some really memorable relationships. So it has its ups, has its downs, and ends up with a nice silver.
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah,
Not what CD Projekt Red would have wanted, though, but doesn't mean it's a bad game.
no,
At all.
it's not. It's not at all. It's very good, in fact. I can see some people really loving it. So I think the message is, if you were scared off by the reviews but always thought the idea of it was good, then you've got nothing to worry about now, really. You've got this package deal to be getting involved with. It's all patched up and working as it should. So time to commit and go for it. Just put aside a bit of time, because if you want to go through it all, it's going to take you a little while. So get stuck in now, I say, and get it started early.
Pee-wee bought this.
What?
Yeah, like pretty close to when it was originally released as well.
Oh, poor boy.
I don't know how much he played. I think he played a couple of hours. And then
It's not a Pee-wee
dropped.
game. That's what I would say.
No, I don't know. I don't know what made him do it. Obviously, again,
Probably Keanu. Like, I'm not even
Lockdowns and
joking.
things.
Well, stuff like that. This was a game that seemed to break through the norms of like the core enthusiast. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was The Witcher. I don't know, but
appealed to a more casual audience. Say, perhaps it was the market in the Keanu and the setting that kind of just pulled people in, and this sort of likeness. I think a lot of people saw it as a GTA style game.
Yeah,
rather than perhaps what it turned out to be. I don't know. It's interesting that, and he wasn't the only one. I think other people that I wouldn't have expected sort of got lured in by it and then scared off.
Yeah, well, they should all re-download it and play it now, because it'll run nice and have all the bells and whistles that it kind of needed at launch. But there you go. Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition earns itself a nice silver. That'll do for this particular edition of Idle Game Chat. As usual, nothing more for us to say other than thanks for your time and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.